So good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to another programme with us, with Social Rights Ireland and with Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. We're here today to talk about what has been in the news in the last week. Of course, there are a lot of things happening today. We could have named or identified any number of different topics or items. There's the news in Iran, the ceasefire, geopolitically speaking, things that are escalating in Lebanon. Despite the so-called ceasefire, there are things happening at home from, I don't know if any of you saw the news, where Fine Gael are declaring themselves the party for a united Ireland. So we could have analysed any number of articles today, including latest news that the Phoenix publication is gone. It's gone into, I think it's receivership as well. So it just goes to show you how independent news struggles actually to survive and how our voices struggle to be heard. So it's great to see so many people here this evening. Thanks very much to you all for coming. And you all probably now know Tommy McKerney and Barry Murray of the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, who this evening have kindly offered to dissect the news. So we've yet to come up with a formal name for this new format of a podcast, but we have a tagline that says, "You've heard the news, now here's the truth." And without further ado, I am going to share on the screen the Guardian article that I will read and that our panelists will discuss. So let me do that. Can everybody see the screen? And I'll read it very quickly. So if I can get it to scroll up or down. Yeah. So disorder in Belfast, stoked by those who would struggle to find the city on a map. Northern Ireland's Justice Minister says online bad faith actors have incited racism in city after knife attack. So this is according to the Guardian, and there's a little clip there of a bus on fire, and it goes like this. Violence in Belfast that forced families to flee their homes on Tuesday night was fueled by online commentators who had struggled to find the city on the map, Northern Ireland Justice Minister has said. The condemnation by Naomi Long came as a UK cabinet minister said that Elon Musk has also had a responsibility not to stoke grievance. The billionaire owner, he's now a trillionaire, owner of X, had used his own account to share images of a horrific knife attack in Belfast on Monday and had amplified far-right messaging about it. A clean-up operation was underway in Belfast on Wednesday morning after violence by mobs of masked men forced families to flee their homes, in some cases in armoured police vehicles. Rioters set fire to vehicles and properties in Belfast on Tuesday evening. It was billed as protests in response to a stabbing in the city allegedly committed by a 30-year-old Sudanese refugee who has been charged with attempted murder. He is due to appear at Belfast Magistrates Court on Wednesday. And there you have a picture of the main leaders of the political parties up north. Long, the Minister of Justice of Northern Ireland and leader of the Alliance Party, told BBC Radio 4's Today programme that bad faith actors had incited racism in the city. The first thing to say is all of us were absolutely horrified and terrified in the wake of the brutal attack that took place in Belfast, she said. I understand that tensions are high and people are frightened and angry in some cases about what happened. What distresses and disturbs me is there are those that prior to yesterday would have struggled to find Belfast on a map, who are online, who are sharing incitement and encouragement for people and weaponising the fear that people genuinely have about what happened to try and turn this into some kind of anti-immigration issue or a racist protest. She added, ultimately, if you're driving people from their homes based on the colour of their skin, you can't dress that up any other way. It's racism. Anna Turley, a Cabinet Officer Minister and Chair of the Labour Party, also said social media was playing a role in increasing the tensions, adding, I think there are bad faith actors who are sitting often many miles away. It's easy for them to stoke these things up. Asked if she was referring to Musk, she told Times Radio he's not living in the kind of communities where we're seeing this kind of activity. He's not at risk. He has a responsibility. Everyone in public and civil life has a responsibility to call for calm and not to stoke grievance or hatred or division or tension that puts vulnerable people and our communities at risk. Musk, a vocal supporter of far-right activists in Europe, including Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who's known as Tommy Robinson, shared commentary by figures including Rupert Lowe, a hard-right British MP, who said millions must go, under an image of the Belfast knife attacker. Detectives have said there is no indication that the knife attack was terror-related. The Police Service of Northern Ireland has launched a critical incident in response to the attack, which was captured on video and appears to show a man stabbing at the head and neck of someone lying on the ground. Earlier on Tuesday, police revealed details on the arrested man's immigration status and how he had travelled to the UK. He entered Northern Ireland across the Irish border in February 2023, having flown to Dublin from Paris. The suspect claimed asylum upon arrival and in September 2023 was granted leave to remain in the UK until 2028. The events have once again prompted calls by those on the right for restrictions and checks to be placed on movement across the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. This is on the government's plate, Carla Lockhart, a DUP MP, said of the violence this week in Northern Ireland. Pressed on the Today programme a number of times to specifically condemn the burning of families' homes, she replied, "I condemn all violence." Now, Tommy, we looked at Carla Lockhart's response to and her involvement in the Scarva counter demo last week, but to that in a second. We'll maybe start where we are going to try to start every week as a matter of routine with the headline. So what do you make of the headline? And then I'll let you go ahead and give a general analysis of this representation of what is happening or has happened in the last week.
Well, for a start, disorder in Belfast stoked by those who struggle to find a map on a city. That's, I think, somewhat misleading. The essence of the troubles didn't lie in outside actors, no matter how ill-informed they were. In some ways, what that's attempting to do is to distract attention from where it really lies. The fact is that, for a start, it was a brutal attack by this person on a man in Belfast. There's no denying it was a vicious, brutal attack. But. That's not to say that he was representative of any community, never mind the migrant community. The fact is that this happened on a Monday evening. By Tuesday evening, there were hundreds of masked individuals on the streets of Belfast, masked, wearing black clothing, almost black uniforms. And not only that, but they were equipped, it turns out now, with lists of houses where migrants or people from not born in Ireland lived. And as well as that, we're finding out that by early Tuesday morning, these lists were circulating, and not only that, but lists were circulating of where protests were to be held. So it's impossible to believe that this happened spontaneously, that it wasn't planned, it wasn't a contingency plan for such an event, that we had bad actors. If we're talking about bad actors there are, but we don't have to look outside the 6 counties in Northern Ireland to find bad actors. The bad actors were prepared and ready to go. Now, coincidentally, not even coincidentally, but the vast majority of these incidents happened within loyalist, unionist areas. Well-known fact is that in nationalist and or Republican areas of Belfast, there was little or no disturbance, and where it did happen, it was quickly crushed. Those conducting the misbehaving in Republican or nationalist areas were soon chevied, put out of commission, and migrant families were assured that they were safe. Now, the fact is that this was organised within unionist, loyalist areas. It's no coincidence. But for a start, first reactions came from elected unionist politicians, including Miss Lockhart, but not only her. First thing they started to talk about was how this individual who's alleged to have committed the crime will have to say, because he's hasn't been convicted, so I have to stick to the format that he's an alleged attempted murderer, that he had come through Dublin and took a bus to the north. Now, the fact is that instead of condemning the incident, they drew the attention to the fact that the guy had come across the border. Their intention was to close the border, to patrol the border, to have it tightened up, which is highly tendentious to the extent that instead of pointing to a miscreant that had committed attempted murder, they were attempting to link it to how he travelled across the border. Now, it's been said several times, many times, almost to the point of exhaustion, that within the last few months there has been weeks actually, conviction of a man for the murder of a young woman called McNally. And this was a vicious murder of a young woman who was pregnant with his child. And there was no similar uprising. There was no attack on white men's houses or anything of that nature. In fact, there was hardly a protest at all. So it's not the first time that this type of incident has happened. The effort was conducted by organised thugs, and it's not the first time this has happened in the six counties, because we've had pogroms in the past, and let's face it, this in the streets where houses were burnt, it was a pogrom. Now, it's maybe not on the same scale as it happened in the past, but when you have people going around house to house, pulling out, attacking homes to clear a district, to clear a street of particular ethnic origin, that is, by definition, a pogrom. So what is happening now, I think we've got to also be clear that when we talk about racism, it's racist. It is undoubtedly racism. It's been orchestrated from within, and it happens in unionist working class areas. I think we've got to also be careful not to say that there's any genetic default or fault within unionist communities. They've been misused, misdirected, and abused. And my own theory is that what's happening here is that similar to what the United States is, there's a replacement theory being circulated in right-wing circles in the States, that white people are being replaced or displaced by migrants and people of colour. To some extent, in the six counties, we have the fact of demographic change, which is happening rapidly. And therefore, there's a fear that the unionist position is going to be undermined by increasing population opposed to the union, and therefore this has been exploited. So the fact is then, as well as that, is that the six counties, we're seeing some of the most appalling social conditions. Housing is a problem. Unemployment is a problem. Lack of opportunity is a problem. There's the closure of industry over the last 30 to 40 years. And instead of addressing the issues created by capitalism, frankly, we have austerity imposed on us. We have a malfunctioning assembly. We have a British state controlling six counties, which is inflicting punishment on its own people in Britain, but to an even greater extent, inflicting punishment in the people of the six counties, cutting back on their budget, and how the budget there is frankly not used very efficiently. But we need housing, we need employment, we need standard of living, that people are not prey to the mischievous, evil prompting from these mal actors that exist within the six counties. Of course, if you social media posts from abroad doesn't help. But that's not the source of the problem. It's not the only part of the problem. I'm not necessarily blaming the Guardian for the interpretation, but it's beside the point. It's just not directly addressing the issue, which is, frankly, it is a racist problem. In the past, it was sectarian. These agencies at one time decided to expel Catholic people from their homes. Now they've decided to expel migrants. And if they once got rid of all the migrants, then presumably the attention may turn back to where it used to be for so many centuries in the past. But I think we've got to look at not condemning or explicitly looking for the defects in working class areas, but to look at the solutions, how we improve it. We've got to demand housing, we've got to demand employment, we've got to demand a better education system, everything that will improve their quality of life, give them an option.
Hello, Tommy. Whenever I first read the article today, what struck me was that all those who were asked to comment seemed to be in agreement. Now, maybe they were just happened to be all asked the same question about the role of social media. Is it enough to explain these riots just by pointing to social media? Because when they point to social media for stoking up grievances or anger, what are they not pointing at? You've said it, but I mean, none of those who were asked for comment, who are supposed to be public representatives, political representatives, none of them named any of the things that you have named, like, the social conditions, the material conditions of the angry people. And also, like, why do messages online, social media messages resonate in particular with working class communities?
I think it's wrong to lay the cause at social media. Social media is the current method of communication. There was no social media in '69, there was no social media in the 1920s. I mean, how do we explain that away? It's something else. Word of mouth goes round. Social media might assist with the delivery, but even before social media was available, these deplorable program style attacks were happening and routinely happening. Belfast in the 1920s was diabolical. In the 1930s, in the 1960s, similar things were happening. So we can look at social media, of course, doesn't help. It spreads the message faster. But at the same time, it had been orchestrated long before the social media, even before this ghastly incident in Belfast where the man was attacked. Certainly, something like this, there'd been a contingency plan led, because nobody turns out 200 or 300 men in black clothing, black masks to attack. And again, the next night there was a confrontation with the PSNI, very disciplined attack on the PSNI. And it was quite obvious that the people that were doing it, making the attack in, I think it was Newton Ards, or Newton Abbey near Chimney Corner, sorry, that they were anything but spontaneous or random. They knew exactly what they're doing, and I saw a film of it for a fairly lengthy time on BBC, the news channel, and on Sky News. And certainly, I mean, they didn't give an inch to the police. They were throwing rocks and burning bins. It was well organized, disciplined in all the wrong way. But that doesn't happen overnight. So it's not, social media is, if you like, it's a scapegoat, it's a convenient scapegoat. Things are much more serious and fundamental than looking to social media. We could close down social media, and what else would change?
But even though social media and perhaps mainstream media had slightly different um, messages in, how they were presenting the riots, depending on which social media or which mainstream media were in concurrence. They, said they were these racist thugs and it was terrible and it was attacks on migrants. And then there were different interpretations from Republican areas and different responses from Republicans and to unionists or to loyalists. But one thing they both had in common is that they both exploded. The news exploded, whether it was social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, both, and BBC News. They exploded. So it doesn't seem, like you say, it doesn't seem like an accident. And you don't often see that because you look how for so long, for 2.5 years, we've been crying out through social media and trying to bring the mainstream media's attention to a live stream genocide, but mainstream media won't pick up on it. So I'm maybe going to go to you, Barry, on that issue. So mainstream media were very interested right from the main, whenever you look up the news, Belfast riots in the last week, Australia, Canada, South Africa, India, it's all over the news. It's international news, and everybody was making a statement on it. Every political party, everybody who had a political opinion had made official statements. That can't be an accident. So the uproar on social media, we see it all of the time where people are screaming for attention and to be heard, and mainstream media conveniently ignores it. But it didn't. Mainstream media didn't ignore this incident and these riots. And in fact, some people might even say, rightly or wrongly, that it was blown out of proportion by mainstream media. What's your take on that, Barry? And would you like to comment just in general
Well,
on this article?
it's interesting, of all the millions of words that have been spoken about this incident across the world and in social media and mainstream media, not a single commentator asked, why did this happen? Why did this man carry out this atrocious attack on what seemed like an innocent victim? Was this man unwell? Does anybody know what this man's history is? Does this man suffer from some form of mental illness? Was he intoxicated at the time? Was he on drugs? I mean, it just seems to be that it's a racist incident. That's it. And then when the riots started in Belfast, that was something that was made for great TV, made for great reporting, and it also the burning of buses and the burning of. I mean, sure, anybody could burn a bus or a car. I mean, that doesn't really take a lot of uh, sophistication, really. The other thing is that it was masked men on the streets, and it was juxtapositioned with uh, peace. The peace process. Is this the almost suggesting that it might possibly be the end of the peace process? Are we going to be drawn back into all of this trouble again? And nobody attempts in any of the articles that I read. I didn't read as many as was out there, but I mean, in the general, you'd get it somewhere. I mean, nobody went back to, what's the cause of all this racism in the first instance? I mean, the racism didn't start with social media. Racism didn't start with this lad attacking somebody in the street. I mean, racism is endemic, not only in the north, but obviously in the south of Ireland, England, America, and in fact, all over the world. And I'm sure, we're looking at white to African and Asian color skinned people, we see that type of racism. But I mean, there's racism also between, Africans. There's racism between Africans, dark skinned people, and brown skinned people. There's racism between Asians and Africans and Asians. There's all kinds of racism out there. Uh, and it's nothing new in humanity, and it probably has been something that has existed within humanity from we came out of the trees. So the thing of it is that, once again, we're everybody and all the newspapers and on all the media is writing about the consequences, but they refuse point blank to examine the cause and the reality of what racism is and who uses it and who does it benefit and why is it used in that way. And this is something that's very important. I mean, okay, it's nice to see. Well, it's not really nice, but I mean, it's attractive to see headlines condemning thugs on the street. But that's not really the question. The question really is, why is there thugs on the street? Who allowed them to be on the street in the first instance? Who encouraged them to be on the street in the first instance? I mean, in the case of Belfast, there's no question that it was the UDA and the UVF was behind that. Everybody knows that. Like that's not. There's no question, no doubt about that. And if we know that, we can be certain sure that all of the intelligence agencies in the north knew that as well, and would have known it was about to happen and would have been monitoring whatever they need to monitor to see it. I mean, I don't think they were even too discreet about it. And I mean, the confrontations between the police and the so-called rioters wasn't really very serious. Like, I mean, the cops sprayed them with water to wash any potential forensic evidence off them. I mean, there was no rubber bullets fired. There was no CS gas fired. I mean, had that been a political demonstration by nationalist stroke Republicans, socialists in West Belfast, I can assure you there'd have been a bit more of a response. There would be no standing back anyway, that's for sure. So I mean, it suited the media, and then I mean, it has no legs, and the media recognises it has no legs too, because once they put 200 people on the street with masks on them and burning people out of their houses and burning cars, it lost any credibility that it had at all, and everybody knows. Like the demonstration in Belfast, then there on Saturday last, 3,000 or 4,000 people. I mean, that demonstrates the thing clearly. I mean, they're a minority within a minority, and colonial settlers, planters within the 6 counties. Uh, this is what they do. This is what they've done, as Tommy pointed out, for since 1922, since the 1920s. It's nothing new, and they're also politically very likely trying to align themselves with the Nigel Farages of this world. They probably think, as do some of the right-wing agitators in the south, they probably think that there's a political momentum gathering here, that this is the train to be on, and any way that we can exercise and generate a bit of um, publicity and store up a bit of tension, use this opportunity. I mean, as Tommy also pointed out, how many other knife attacks, shootings, and whatever else, and women killed, and whatever else within the north in the last 12 months, in the last 5 years? Was there any demonstrations for it? Anybody out in the street burning houses? No, there wasn't, and there won't be. And it's easy to point the finger at somebody with different colour of skin. It doesn't take much thinking.
What I might do now, Barry, actually is because of a wee bit of time, and maybe this is not planned necessarily, but I did when we were looking through news items and how the different news are presented, I found a couple of other. So just so you know, the Guardian might come as a surprise. Some people be like, "What? The Guardian's a left-wing newspaper?" It's obviously it's
Not.
it's not. Most people here will know that, but a lot of people who self-identify as being on the left would be their, think it's their uh, newspaper, their respectable newspaper. But I'm going to flick up. I'm trying to get it here now. I hope I can find it. Let's look at, say, how the Mirror presented this. So a tabloid newspaper as opposed to this respectable Guardian newspaper. Let me see if I can get it up and share the screen. Let's see. Might not be able to do it because I'm only in this last minute. Oh, no. Can you see that, Barry? Sorry to spring this on you, but others might also be interested just to say, like, what's the difference? This is not my Belfast. Oops, disappeared. Has it? Oh, this is not my Belfast. Where is it gone?
You want to scroll down, maybe?
Mightn't let me. Maybe it's a paid thing or something. Uh, yeah, have to be signed in. I must have just got the headlines there, but I got another one as well. Again, just bear with me. Where is it? And it was from this. Can move this out of the way. Let me see. Belfast burns again. This is a different one. Sorry, it's not the Mirror. The Mirror is still scrolling for me. If it comes up, I'll come back to it. So this is the Morning Star, which is considered a socialist publication. So don't know if you've read it, Barry, or if anybody else has read it, but Belfast burns again. Let's look at the sensationalism around the headline, the tagline. Recent violence in Belfast was not spontaneous, as seems to be the way it's been interpreted here this evening. It was built on years of failure and political neglect, argues Stephen O'Neill. Again, the dramatic image of the riot police, scenes of chaos, the sensational words. If it's okay, I might just read this quickly. How do you feel about that, Barry? I'll read through it. On the night of June 8th, a man was stabbed outside apartments off Kinnard Avenue in North Belfast. He lost an eye and is in critical condition. A Sudanese man has been charged with attempted murder. Within hours, a video of the attack had gone viral, and by Tuesday night, hundreds of mass protesters were moving through Belfast streets, burning buses, cars, businesses, houses, targeting ethnic minorities. Don't tell me I can't get the rest of it.
Hmm.
No, I think I could. I must have only been able to access it. Yeah, you
Sorry,
have.
just click on the.
Oh,
Just go
yeah.
down. Just click. Yeah. Okay.
So sorry, this is a bit impromptu. While the brutal attack and the riots that followed have been shocking, they're not surprising. Race hate crimes in Northern Ireland have reached their highest recorded level since 2004, with nearly 1,500 offences in the year to March 2026. Following on from last year's racist riots, this last week is not simply a spontaneous eruption of working class anger. It is organised, it has happened before, and it will happen again. The vast majority of the violence took place in loyalist areas of Belfast, with sporadic incidents elsewhere across the north. The evidence of loyalist paramilitary involvement was suggestive rather than conclusive, with senior PSNI officers recognising that the coordination of mobilisation across multiple areas may point to organisation, while politicians from Sinn Féin and the SDLP were more direct in naming it directly. The precise degree of that involvement is difficult to ascertain, but the broad consensus among those working across these communities is that the disorder could not have occurred without some level of paramilitary engagement, whether an active green light from leadership or something potentially more worrying, and an ability to exert much influence at all. That would point to a shifting dynamic within loyalism, with younger and more militant elements driven not by sectarianism alone, but by far-right narratives that have become steadily more mainstreamed and normalised. But as with previous outbreaks, the pattern is familiar. Early caution about naming loyalist paramilitary involvement, which is only to be confirmed later when the flames have abated. This raises again the question of why loyalist paramilitaries exist at all, still organising, still recruiting, embedded in communities. This is not a fringe movement or a disorganised mob, it is an armed militia capable of terrorising entire communities at will. What makes it more insidious still is the political cover provided by the Loyalist Community Council, a body that grants prescribed terrorist organisations a veneer of legitimacy while they engage in criminal activity and exercise coercive control over their own communities. That they receive state recognition and operate with such impunity is a profound indictment of how seriously the British state takes racist violence when it wears a particular kind of flag. The same level of armed paramilitary organisation would not be tolerated in Republican communities or indeed in Finchley. Of course, social media has played a role in both organising and escalating the disorder. Posts circulated widely giving times and locations for protests laced with anti-immigration and overtly racist messaging. Others listed roads to be blocked or instructed businesses to be shut. Among the most disturbing material to emerge was a compiled list of home addresses of migrant families collated and shared across platforms, putting lives at risk. Analysis will follow, but two things are already clear. Social media channels with links to established loyalist networks played a role in coordinating the disorder, alongside a flood of disinformation and racist conspiracy theories that had both domestic and international origins. The role of social media in coordinating and amplifying the disorder will be examined in detail in forthcoming research from Trademark Belfast on far-right networks, online radicalisation and disinformation in Ireland. But there's another truth from last week that goes largely unreported in the British press. In Belfast, Republican communities held the line. There were a handful of attempts at organising anti-immigrant protests that emerged and dissipated very quickly. In Republican areas, there were no attacks on foreign workers, no scapegoating, no pogroms. While others burned people out and whipped up fear, Republican communities stood firm, not as a favour, but as a principle, and it stands in sharp contrast to what loyalist militias and their political enablers have spent this week doing to their city. Amid the disorder, however, the response from local communities and civil society was immediate and striking. Organisations and community groups from across Belfast moved quickly. I didn't realise this is so long. It's too long to read it out because people didn't come to this Zoom to have an article read at them. So apologies for that. But what I'm going to say, Barry, I don't know if you read this article, is that this article says a lot of what we have already said, but it does not say what the root cause either is. It doesn't focus on capitalism or imperialism. Perhaps it is implied, but again, surely, and I'm being very critical, maybe slightly controversial, surely the Morning Star can do better as a social. Why doesn't it? It just talks about Republicans versus loyalists, and Republicans responded well, but loyalists didn't. Perhaps that is reporting what happened. But again, ending with solidarity, not scapegoats. I mean, is solidarity going to save us from capitalism?
Well, I don't think so. Tommy wants to get in there anyhow, so go ahead,
Sure.
Tommy.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I think this is one of the best articles that have been on the subject, and I think, in fairness to the author, he has highlighted the absence of problem with social conditions in the city.
It's not. We can't de-link the reality of the lack of progress within 30 years of what they call a peace process, which is in fact a pacification process. We can't de-link that from high levels of racism particularly within loyalist areas. And I mean, it's a lack of education, it's a lack of understanding, and it's also an alignment with imperialism and an alignment with being planters, effectively, and colonialism, and an occupation within the six countries that still goes on. And they seem to want to align themselves with Israel, of all people. I mean, it seems incredible that they would. So, I mean, they can't and wouldn't identify with the Palestinians. They won't identify with any liberation struggles. I mean, the thing about it is that, reforms will not capitalism break. But the reality is that we have to work with transformative reforms based on a revolutionary program. I mean, there's no way that you can't go along and point out all the problems with imperialism and capitalism and not assist people's lives on the ground today. I mean, the ending of capitalism and the ending of imperialism is someday maybe, but people's lives are now, today, and that's the type of thing that we can't ignore, because otherwise you won't have anybody beside you. You won't have, and we're not going to be able, no matter how politically aware or how radical we are or how revolutionary we are, or no matter what form of resistance we and Dow or whatever, unless we have the people with us, we will nowhere. And it's clear that the loyalism is on the road to nowhere. I mean, and the demonstrations on the street over the last week or whenever there was, I mean, it's horrendous. I mean, it doesn't do them any favours. And I mean, you have to remember that the majority of them are from working class areas. I mean, the captains of industry are rubbing their hands with glee because once again, there's no chance within the people. And again, that's the point that needs to be brought out here. There's no chance of the working class Protestant people and the working class nationalist Republican people in the West Belfast and other areas coming together, or any part of the north for that matter, coming together, as long as those types of divisions are fostered, and no explanation as to why they happen. That's the key thing. I mean, at least in that article, from what I've seen of it, there's some attempt to put a bit of sense into what was happening, some context. You know, if you go, probably if you went to the Daily Mirror, we didn't get to read it, but I mean, I can imagine the Daily Mirror article would be sensationalist. It would be using all this sort of horrific, terrible, all these words, and no explanation as to what happened, or no question even. I mean, sometimes you mightn't have an explanation, but at the very least you could ask a question. Is this caused by? But none of that, nothing like that happens. You know, I mean, at least there's some attempt in that
Well,
article.
I would say that the three articles, I would have to say, suggest that loyalist violence is mainly due to far-right extremism. But
But it's not.
surely it's not, and surely that's what I think is lacking in all three articles, that nobody has said that loyalism is historically a counter-revolutionary force tied to imperialism. You know, the
Yeah.
solutions, yes, public housing, stronger unions, welfare, they might address real problems, but they rely on the same British state that upholds
But it doesn't
imperialism.
matter. It doesn't matter, Ocean. You see, you are where you are. We don't have power. We don't have power, and we don't have the levers of power. So what we have to do, what the great Lenin did, and many others since him, is to build a parallel system that uses that power, but uses that power to the benefit of the people on the ground, and to build within that. You don't have any choice. You're not going to smash that power and then build. That's not going to happen.
But is it not better to argue that racism and fascism can't be defeated through reforms or appeal to solidarity alone? That also, isn't this what we're about? It's about revolutionary organisation as well, anti-imperialist national liberation. It's about the overthrow of the capitalist imperialist state.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
and if we don't put that message out as socialists or socialist republicans or communists, well then if it's nowhere and it's not said at all, I mean, I think it was a missed opportunity is all. It's just a part of this, I suppose, dissecting the news is to look at what's been said, but also what's not being said and why not.
Yeah.
And we can understand why some things are not being said by the Mirror or by the Guardian. But, you know, I think we need to always look at ourselves as well as socialists and critique ourselves as much. But mostly it was about looking at the Guardian, the news, how it was conveyed. And also, again, similar to last week's article, if you remember, who was asked for comment? The political representatives were asked for comment. No, nobody from the local communities were given a voice. There's no passing the mic there, which reminds me of the time I need to pass the mic over. I think, is there any concluding points though, Barry, that yourself or Tommy would like to make before we end the actual recording and go to a Q&A?
Well, I think I think that people need to understand that what we're talking about here is, building a revolution. And building a revolution isn't a revolution. You just can't have a revolution tomorrow, flick a switch tomorrow morning and say, okay, now let's have a revolution. We have to build for that revolution. We have to build for change. We have to build through transformative reforms and progressive thinking. We have to build for a position whereby the state is confronted and whereby people feel empowered to confront that state. Because I mean, as I continually point out, at the end of the day, if we don't have the population, all of the people, for example, on this Zoom tonight, and the hundreds of thousands, millions of working class people within Ireland, if we don't have their say so, if we don't even at least have their agreement and understanding of what we're doing, even if they don't fully understand the technicalities, you're going nowhere. And that's what we have to build. I mean, I can sit here all night and outline Marxist theory, and so can Tommy, and and so can you, and we can sort of say, we need to be doing this, we need to be, and all that's right, all that, there's nothing wrong with any of that. But at the end of the day, you have to work within your communities and get people to understand why it's beneficial to them. Because revolution, for the vast majority of the population, are asking, when revolution is mentioned or if revolution was happening, the very first question they're going to ask is, what's in it for me? That doesn't sound very revolutionary, but that's the reality. People need to know people's material interests, their income, their housing, their health, their educations, their children's welfares, their own welfare. All of that is down to food and water, everything, climate. All of that has relevance to people's lives. And we have to present that in a revolutionary perspective. I mean, you can equally present all of that in a bourgeois perspective, in a bourgeois way, if you want to. And that's what's being done a lot of the time in most things like that. But we have to present it in a revolutionary way. That's the only way that it can. And we have to be understanding that what we were about here is ending capitalism and imperialism, destroying them. I mean, get rid of them. And why would we say that? Because we know that there was something before capitalism, and it was feudalism, and it went too. And capitalism is only 300 years of age. It's very young. And the next stage is socialism. But it'll not happen just like that, and it won't happen by fancy words. It'll only happen with work on the ground. Gormailgat.
Gormailgat, Barry. Tommy, do you want to come in and have the final say since you started the program? It would be good if you could end the recording on a good note.
Thank you. I think, listen, it's not all doom and gloom because we had a good turnout in Belfast there on Saturday opposed to racism, and also the strength within the Republican communities as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, but I think it's also important that we have a sharp analysis of what happened. It's not just nasty, bad Protestants. It is actually misguided working class people who are being taken advantage of. People that have at their heart, in essence, are decent people misused and misguided. And we've got to keep that in mind.
Thank you. I'm glad that you did say that, and we need to always remember those who are being used and abused, certainly for other agendas that will never serve their interests, their needs, or their very basic needs. I look forward to the day when we have a march united against imperialism, united against capitalism, united against racism seems to be more attractive to those who identify as left as well, or to a certain cohort of people. But I'll be at the United Against Imperialism. And Barry, I know there's no such thing as a perfect revolution or the perfect revolutionary. So he keeps texting me that every day, put me back in my box. But thanks very much, Tommy and Barry, for being with us, for continuing the conversation. In many ways, I hope to God we don't have to analyse any more riots, and things will die down. But inevitably, we live in this violent system, and there will be more news to dissect next week. So thanks everybody for coming. Stay on afterwards if you wish for extra comments. All the best. See you on Monday next.